Well, what an interesting afternoon in Cardiff. As brutal for Wales as it was impressive by South Africa. I was here in the Principality Stadium for commentary of the game on radio, so I'm going to be reflecting on it in this video. Make sure you have your say in the comment section down below. What did you make of it from a Welsh fan's perspective? How do you come away from this game? A chastening defeat, but a pretty inexperienced Welsh side as well. And from the Springbok fans' perspective, was this exactly the sort of performance you wanted to see from South Africa as they step foot on European soils and they continue to look to build for the World Cup in France as well? Make sure you drop a comment down below, like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So I think we're going to start with South Africa in this video as the team that won the game ultimately. Going to try and approach it by asking, what did we learn about South Africa? What did we learn about Wales from this result? Because it was quite intriguing. I mean, it lost its interest from a neutral's perspective and just from a competitive standpoint quite early on. Certainly in the second half, even at halftime, I was looking at the scoreline, Wales 9, South Africa 24, with those two quick tries, the penalty try, and then the other try South Africa scored right towards the end of the half that you felt took it out of reach for Wales. And then it continued to be proven that that was the case in the second half. But what did we learn about South Africa in this game? Well, I think on the one hand, it was further evidence of the way in which they have tried to develop their attack. We've all known about South Africa for a long time, their physicality, their set piece, which the scrum, by the way, looked very, very impressive once again, and I'll get onto the scrum for Wales because I think that's a concern in just a moment as well. We know that they have those areas of their game, but it has been trying to add layers to the way in which they attack. I think we saw it against Australia in the Rugby Championship, and again I think today was a very, very good example of that, because when they got the opportunity to go wide, they took it, and they looked very, very dangerous as well when they could get in behind that Welsh back line as well. So the way in which they've added layers to their game, I think, is impressive. I think they are a different team. They are a different type of team to what we saw in the 2019 World Cup and even in the Lions tour as well a couple of years ago as well. They have developed, they have changed the way in which they approach the game. Will it be enough to be able to beat the very best teams in the world? I suppose we'll find out really when we get to the World Cup in France. But there's no question at all that I think if you're a Springbok fan, you are probably fairly satisfied with where you are at the moment and the direction that the team is tracking in. You're not cock-a-hoop. I wouldn't say you're necessarily thinking you're guaranteed of a spot in a World Cup final or quite how it will go. It's a tough side of the draw South Africa are on, but their game's developing quite nicely at the moment, and it was quite nice to see it in the flesh actually, to see the way in which they are attacking, because as I say, they did look quite impressive. A part of that as well is Kane and Moody. I think they have further depth on their wings. South African fans will have been watching him domestically for quite a while and how impressive he is. His try scoring ratio to games at the moment is looking absolutely brilliant, and when given the opportunities he was able to take them. He got the man of the match performance here. I think it probably could have gone to a number of different players, but Moody was definitely the beneficiary of a lot of the good work that South Africa did. So another big plus point I think from a South African perspective is that squad depth. We've spoken about it before. I think on paper they are without question one of the best squads in the world, and I think there's further evidence of that today. And once they hit their straps, they can really go through the gears. They had to bide their time here, and actually that is something I'll mention in just a second. They didn't have it all their own way, even though the final scoreline was what it was. Wales 16, South Africa 52. It was absolutely brutal. Their best victory over Wales in Wales that the Springboks have ever produced. I believe I'm correct in saying that. I heard someone say it at the end of the game. I think it is true. But when they start to shift through the gear, then it's like a tidal wave of momentum that started going their way, and they played some really, really nice stuff. A slight negative, and in fact I'm hesitant to even call it a negative, because when you have won by the scoreline that I just mentioned, there aren't really any negatives. I suppose one bit of constructive feedback or kind of analysis, observation if you like, is the first 30 minutes they did allow Wales to get back into the game. I mean, if you think up till about 33 minutes, which was when we had the Rio Dyer yellow card and penalty try, up until that point the score was Wales 9, South Africa 12. It had been a much tighter half an hour, even though South Africa came out the blocks really, really well. Lovely bit of skill by Kolisi to offload to Marks for the first try of the game really early on. They did allow Wales back into it, partly with their discipline, partly with their accuracy. They gave up field position, and Wales were able to kind of keep themselves in there in the game until, as I say, that yellow card and penalty try. And at that point it kind of opened the floodgates, didn't they? They scored another try, they continued that in the second half, and the game was well beyond Wales. So my slight kind of concern, if you like, if you can call it a concern, or just something to probably keep an eye on, is I think if you do that against the better sides in the world, then you will get punished. If you go up early against the best sides in the world but then allow them back into it, they will do more than just be able to kick penalties against you. So that is probably the area that I would imagine Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber will be targeting, to say, boys, brilliant performance, some excellent attacking work. When you got your opportunities, they took them, but don't give your opponents hope. Don't give them a chance to get back into the game, because that is when you can be punished. Final couple of words on the Springboks. First of all, got to mention Siya Kolisi. ACL injury and returning after 4 months is unheard of. It's absolutely mental, and I thought he looked good today. I thought he looked fit. I mentioned the offload for the opening try. They gave him 40 minutes here. I would think we'll probably see him against the All Blacks on Friday as well. And that's my final point, is it will be really interesting to see to what extent they continue with the rotation policy that they have adopted so far this year. It's a 6-day turnaround before they face the All Blacks at Twickenham. I believe that game's sold out. I think it'll be a brilliant occasion, a great final match for those two sides before the World Cup in France. To what extent do they continue to rotate? Because a lot of players here, 6-day turnaround, it's not too easy, so that's something to keep an eye on. Let's get on to Wales. What did we learn about Wales? Well, I think my big takeaway from this game is that inexperience will kill you. In that Wales in the week lost Liam Williams, they lost Dan Biggott, and they lost Alex Cuthbert from their starting team. That's 251 international caps that went out of their team. And you did look at that side and it was youthful. In particular, the back line, I think Kieran Hardy was the only player in the backs that had more than 10 appearances for Wales. He had 17, so isn't even one of their most experienced nines. And you saw that. I think you saw that in a lot of the tries they conceded. Look at Mason Grady trying to offload it over his own try line and giving it to Jesse Creel to score. The interceptions they threw as well. And I know all part of that is to do with South African pressure. I also think a part of that is about inexperience and not quite knowing when it's on, when it isn't on, and those sorts of areas are a reality of what you got ultimately. So that's also the other part of this for Wales. The scoreline is ugly. The game in the end, and from kind of 33 minutes through to about the hour mark, was ugly. It was one way, and you wondered what score South Africa would be able to rack up. But this won't be the team that starts the World Cup. They have experienced players to come back in, even though they are a side in some sort of transition. So I wouldn't be completely down in the dumps. I think it's probably a reality check for Wales after the drudgery of what we've seen them and England produce over the last couple of weeks. This is what happens when you're an inexperienced team and you come up against one of the best sides in the world. You can be punished, and it's actually quite a harsh lesson for a lot of those players to learn, but maybe a valuable time for them to learn it with the World Cup kicking off in 20 days. I think Wales' first game's in 22 games in France. Now's the time to learn it. I do wonder if any of those players have played them in or out of contention for Warren Gatland. He names his team on Monday, so I'll be doing a video on the channel on Monday to go through the Welsh selection for the World Cup. But as I say, that experience is always going to kill you. Yes, they were disappointed with some of their execution and some of their decision making. I kind of feel like for a lot of those young guys, it's a part of the process. The other area is the scrum. Now, this has to be an area of concern for Wales. And look, this isn't just purely based on today. There will be loads of international teams that face this Springbok scrum, and they will be taken to the cleaners. They will cough up penalties. But it's more an accumulation. I was here against Georgia towards the back end of last year when Wales lost. They coughed up a lot of penalties. Again, Georgia, I know, have a very, very strong scrum. But I just wonder if that area of the game is strong enough for them. They have players to come back in. It was a really inexperienced front row that they had today. And even the options off the bench didn't have mega experience. So again, they probably will get better, but I think the scrum has to be somewhat an area of concern for Wales at the moment. And then game control as well. They were able to keep themselves in the game, but when it started getting away from them, you didn't feel like they were able to wrestle back control at all. And that comes back to the experience, I do understand that, but heading into a World Cup in France and you look at knockout games, and I know Wales are on a side of the draw where you feel they don't necessarily have to play that well to get to a quarter-final. Once you get to a quarter-final, once you get to an arm wrestle, in those sorts of games, you have to be able to have decision makers that can still help you control a game, and that was probably something that I think Warren Gatland, upon reflection, will be pretty disappointed about here overall. So those are kind of my immediate takeaways here from the Principality Stadium. Make sure you drop a comment down below. What did you make of it? If you're a South African fan, if you're a Welsh fan, or just any thoughts overall, even if you don't support either of those nations. It is clearing out. It's time for me to probably get out of here. So I look forward to reading your comments. Like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you in the next one.